The Atlanta sun hung high, casting a golden haze over the city's sprawling streets, but it offered no clue to the unraveling about to unfold in one of its humblest corners. Peachtree Street thrummed with life cars honking, pedestrians weaving, past food trucks, and the faint hum of ambition in the air. Amid the bustle, Malcolm Hayes pulled his old Chevy pickup into a side lot, the engine rattling to a stop. To anyone passing by, he was just another face in the crowd. A man in faded jeans with a small rip at the knee, a black hoodie zipped halfway, and a Braves cap pulled low over his brow. His boots scuffed the gravel as he stepped out, but Malcolm wasn't just anyone. He was the owner of Grammy's Kitchen, the soul food diner whose green and yellow neon sign flickered above the door across the street. And today, he was walking into his own restaurant as a stranger dot at 38. Malcolm carried the quiet strength of a man who'd built something from nothing. His dark eyes held a mix of determination and weariness, etched by years of hustle and heart. Born in a working-class Atlanta neighborhood, he'd grown up watching his grandmother, Alma, pour love into every pot of collard greens and pan of cornbread she made. Alma's kitchen was a sanctuary where neighbors were fed, stories were shared, and second chances were served alongside peach cobbler. When she passed, Malcolm vowed to carry her legacy forward, scraping together every dime to open Grammy's Kitchen 12 years ago. It wasn't just a diner. It was a promise to keep Alma's warmth alive, to give people a place to belong, especially those the world overlooked. He'd done it, too, built a name for slow-cooked brisket, hired folks fresh out of hardship, and earned a loyal crowd. But lately, something was off, and it gnawed at him like a bad dream. Malcolm leaned against his truck, staring at the neon sign. The G flickered slightly, a small imperfection he'd meant to fix. He hadn't walked through the front door as a customer in over a year, too busy with supplier contracts, payroll, and expansion plans for a second location. But the whispers had grown louder. Anonymous online reviews complaining of cold service. A regular who'd stopped coming. A friend who'd said, "It don't feel like Alma's no more." Malcolm's gut told him the problem wasn't the food. It was the heart of the place. So he'd done what most owners wouldn't. He dressed down, trading his usual button-down and blazer for clothes that made him invisible. No one would recognize him like this, not even the staff he paid every 2 weeks. He needed the truth, and as Alma used to say, "You want to know a place's soul, stand in its crowd when nobody's looking." He crossed the street, the lunch rush in full swing at 12:46 p.m. The air hit him first, thick with the smoky sweetness of barbecue sauce, the buttery warmth of cornbread, and the sharp tang of slow-cooked brisket. It was the kind of scent that could make you forget your troubles, the kind Alma called a warm hug with flavor. Grammy's Kitchen was meant to feel like that, like her. The dining room was modest but alive. Wooden tables scarred with years of laughter, vinyl booths patched with care, and a jukebox playing soft country tunes. Photos of Alma in her church had adorned the walls, her tough but loving smile watching over the place. But as Malcolm stepped into the line, something felt wrong. No one greeted him. No smiles, no nods. Just the clatter of plates and the hum of distracted chatter dotted the counter. 2 cashiers worked, or rather didn't. Evan Carter, a lanky young man with short twists and a bored expression, tapped his phone under the counter, barely glancing at the line. Jade Ramsey, chewing gum so loudly it cut through the music, stared at the register screen like it owed her money. Malcolm stepped forward when Jade called, "Next," without looking up. "Can I get the pulled pork sandwich and a side of baked?" "Beans, please," he said, his voice polite but unassuming. Jade tapped the screen, her eyes still fixed on it. "That it?" she asked, popping her gum. "Yeah, thanks." He paid in cash, stepped aside, and waited, his cap shielding his face. As he scanned the room, that's when he heard it. Evan slid his phone into his pocket, smirking at Jade. "You see that guy?" he said, nodding toward Malcolm. "Another walk-in, probably off Peachtree. Bet he don't tip, they never do." Jade laughed, low and sharp. "Ever since they started that shelter program, it's been downhill. Letting just anybody in here." Malcolm's chest tightened, but he kept still, his face a mask. The words stung, not just for him, but for the customers. They mocked people like Isaiah, a kid from the shelter program who'd started last week, or the regulars who came because Grammy's kitchen was supposed to be a haven. Jade leaned closer to Evan, her voice dropping but not enough. "They say the owner's some rich black dude, never shows his face. Probably chilling in Buckhead with his green juice while we're stuck here doing everything." Evan chuckled. "Bet he don't even know who he hired." Malcolm's jaw clenched, but he didn't move. His sandwich was likely being prepped in the back, but he felt no hunger. The anger was there, hot and sharp, but beneath it was something colder, disappointment. This place was Alma's legacy, built to give people a shot, to show respect where the world offered none. Yet the people wearing his name on their aprons were tearing it apart. He glanced around. An older man in a suit, likely a regular named Harold, sat by the window, frowning at his iced tea. A young mother wrestled with her toddler, waiting for a server who hadn't checked in. The warmth Malcolm remembered, the laughter, the easy banter was gone. Alma wouldn't recognize this place. He stepped to the counter, his voice flat. "Actually, cancel that sandwich." Evan barely looked up. "You sure?" "Yeah," Malcolm said. "Lost my appetite." He turned and walked out, the bell above the door jingling softly behind him in his truck. Malcolm sat staring at the steering wheel, the neon sign's glow reflecting off the windshield. His fingers tapped a slow rhythm on the dashboard, each beat a question. How had it come to this? When had he let the soul of Grammy's kitchen slip away? He thought of Alma's words. "You can't plant a garden and forget to water it, baby." He'd been absent, too caught up in spreadsheets and dreams of growth. But he wasn't done. He needed to see how deep this rot ran, to hear more before he acted. As he watched customers come and go, a teenager in a school uniform, a construction worker brushing dust off his boots, Malcolm knew one thing. Grammy's kitchen was still his, and he was ready to fight for its heart. Malcolm Hayes stood near the counter of Grammy's kitchen, the jingle of the front door bell fading behind him as another customer shuffled in. The air was thick with the smoky warmth of brisket and the sweet bite of barbecue sauce. A scent that should have felt like home. But the lunch rush at 12:50 p.m. revealed a different reality. The wooden tables were crowded. The vinyl booths creaked under the weight of families and workers, and the jukebox's soft country twang struggled against the clatter of plates. Yet the warmth Malcolm had built this place to embody his grandmother. Alma's legacy was nowhere to be found. The staff moved like automatons, efficient but detached, their faces blank or sour. Malcolm adjusted his Braves cap, pulling it lower, and waited for his canceled sandwich order to be forgotten, his eyes scanning the diner he owned, a barely recognized dot at the register. Evan Carter, a lanky cashier with short twists, leaned against the counter, his thumb flicking across his phone screen. His name tag was crooked, his posture slouched, as if the line of customers was an inconvenience. Jade Ramsey, the other cashier, popped her gum with a snap that cut through the din, her eyes fixed on the register like it was a chore. Malcolm had stepped aside after canceling his order, but their words from moments ago, another walk-in, probably off Peachtree, bet he don't tip, still burned in his ears. He glanced at the photos of Alma on the walls, her smile a silent rebuke to the indifference unfolding before him. Evan pocketed his phone, smirking at Jade. "You see, that hoodie guy?" he said, his voice low but not low enough, nodding toward Malcolm. "Looks like he wandered in from the bus stop." Probably can't even afford the beans. Jade laughed, her gums snapping again. Yeah, ever since they started hiring from that shelter program, it's all downhill. Customers like that? They're just trouble. Malcolm's fingers tightened around the receipt in his pocket, but he kept his face neutral. The sting wasn't personal, it was worse. They were mocking the very people Grammy's kitchen was meant to uplift, the ones Alma would have fed without. A second thought. Across the dining room, a young mother struggled to calm her toddler, her plate of ribs untouched as she waited for a server. An older man in a suit herald, a regular Malcolm vaguely recognized, sipped his iced tea, his frown deepening with every passing minute. The service wasn't just slow, it was absent. Malcolm's gaze shifted to the kitchen window, where Leroy Jackson, the grill master, moved with steady precision. Leroy's deep laugh, a sound Malcolm remembered from the diner's early days, carried briefly over the noise. He was flipping ribs, directing a young cook with a calm authority that stood out in the chaos. Lara had been with Malcolm since the beginning, hired after a halfway house recommendation, and his loyalty to Alma's vision was unshakable. But even he seemed to be fighting a losing battle. Jade's voice pulled Malcolm back. They say the owner's some big shot now, she said, leaning closer to Evan. Black guy, lives in Buckhead, probably doesn't even eat here anymore. Leaves us to deal with this mess. Evan snorted. That he don't know half the names on the payroll. Ghost boss, that's what I call him. The words hit Malcolm like a punch, not because they were cruel, but because they held a shard of truth. He'd been absent, buried in meetings and expansion plans, letting the diner drift. But their casual disrespect for him, for the customers, for the place cut deeper than his own guilt. Malcolm stepped closer to the counter, pretending to check the menu board. He caught sight of Talia Foster, a server in her mid-30s, rushing between tables with a tray of sweet tea pitchers. Her face was tight with stress, her apron stained with sauce. She glanced at Evan and Jade, her lips pressing into a thin line, but said nothing. Malcolm noted her effort, the way she smiled at a table of kids despite the chaos. She was trying, but the weight of the team's dysfunction was dragging her down. Then it happened, a small but telling moment. Evan, distracted by his phone, bumped into a tray of water glasses Talia had set on the counter. 2 glasses tipped, spilling across a nearby table where a family sat. Water splashed onto a man's lap, and he stood up, exasperated. Come on, man, he said, brushing his pants. Talia rushed over, apologizing profusely, grabbing napkins. Evan rolled his eyes, muttering, Not my fault, she left him there. Malcolm's instinct was to step in, but he held back, kneeling to pick up a fallen glass instead. Talia glanced at him, surprised. Thanks, she said, her voice strained but genuine. Malcolm nodded, his jaw tight. Jade, watching from the register, whispered to Evan, Look at Mr. Hoodie playing cleanup crew. They laughed, and Malcolm felt his patience fraying, but he reminded himself, Watch, don't react. Not yet. Malcolm stepped back, blending into the crowd near the jukebox as Talia mopped up the spill. The diner's noise forks clinking, kids laughing, the sizzle of the grill felt hollow without the warmth he'd once known. He thought of the early days, when Grammy's kitchen was a family. Leroy sharing ribs with the dishwashers after closing, Alma's recipes binding them together. Now, it was a machine, and some of its parts were rusted. Evan and Jade's laughter echoed in his mind, not just for their mockery, but for how easily it came, as if disrespect was their default. Malcolm pulled out his phone, typing a note. Cashiers dismissive. Mock customers and owner. Service slow. Team fractured. He needed to see more, to understand how deep this rot ran. As he waited, a young man in a faded jacket entered. Isaiah. From the shelter program, Malcolm realized. Isaiah's eyes darted nervously, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He approached the counter, and Malcolm watched closely. Jade glanced at him, her smile thin. "What you want?" she asked, her tone flat. Isaiah mumbled, "Catfish combo, greens instead of fries." Jade tapped the screen, barely acknowledging him. Evan, leaning nearby, whispered, "Another one of those guys. Bet he's gone in a week." Isaiah's shoulders hunched, and Malcolm felt a surge of anger, not at the kid, but at the staff who made him feel small. Alma's voice rang in his head. "You don't build people up by tearing them down, Malcolm." Laura's voice cut through from the kitchen. "Order up," he called, sliding a plate of ribs through the window. He caught sight of Isaiah and gave a nod, the kind that said, "You're welcome here." Isaiah relaxed slightly, clutching his receipt. Malcolm typed another note. "Leroy holds the line. Others undermine it." Leroy was the heart of the kitchen, a man who turned his life around and now mentored others. But he couldn't carry the diner alone. Malcolm moved toward the door, passing Nia Brooks, a young cook working the fryer. Nia's focus was intense, her movements precise despite the chaos. She'd graduated culinary school, but struggled to find work until Malcolm hired her. He saw potential in her, but today, she looked frustrated, glancing at Evan and Jade with barely concealed irritation. Malcolm made a mental note to talk to her later. She was another piece of the puzzle. Outside, the Atlanta heat pressed against him. The neon signs glowed, dimmed by the midday sun. Malcolm leaned against his truck, the gravel crunching under his boots. The diner's front window framed the scene inside. Customers waiting, Evan on his phone, Jade popping gum, Talia rushing. It was a snapshot of neglect, and Malcolm knew he shared the blame. He'd been too hands-off, trusting the team to carry Alma's vision without his presence. But trust without guidance was a recipe for failure. He walked down the street to a gas station, grabbing a coffee to clear his head. As he returned, he lingered near the alley behind the diner, where a cracked kitchen window let voices spill out. Evan's voice was unmistakable. "Ghost Boss ain't coming back," he said, laughing. "If he does, he'll probably roll in. Like he invented BBQ." Jade chimed in, "Mr. Fancy, too good for this place." Malcolm's chest tightened, but then Leroy's voice rumbled, low and firm. "Y'all don't know what you're talking about." Malcolm started this with nothing but a smoker and a dream. "Show some respect." Silence followed, then Evan's scoff. "Relax, man. If you don't care, why should we?" Malcolm stepped back, his coffee growing cold in his hand. Leroy's defense warmed him, but Evan and Jade's words cut deep. He typed one last note, culture broken, respect missing. Time to act. He glanced at the neon sign, its flicker a reminder of what was at stake. Tomorrow, he'd walk back and nod. As a stranger, but as the man who'd built this place. And when he did, the truth would come with him. Malcolm Hayes sat in his Chevy pickup, the engine off, the Atlanta afternoon heat seeping through the cracked window. The neon glow of Grammy's kitchen sign flickered across the street, a reminder of the legacy he built and the one he was losing. The lunch rush was winding down, but the sting of what he'd witnessed inside lingered. Evan Carter and Jade Ramsey's mocking whispers, their dismissal of customers like Isaiah, their scorn for the ghost boss they didn't know was him. Malcolm's fingers hovered over his phone, where he typed notes during the chaos. Cashiers dismissive, mock customers and owner. Service slow. Team fractured. The words were clinical, but the disappointment they carried was anything but. Grammy's kitchen was supposed to be Alma's kitchen, warm, welcoming, a place where everyone belonged. Instead, it felt like a stranger's house. He stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots, and walked back toward the diner, his Braves cap still low. He wasn't ready to confront anyone, not yet. He needed to see more, to understand how deep the rot ran. The front door's bell jingled as he re-entered, blending into the crowd near the jukebox. The dining room was quieter now, with only a few tables occupied, a construction worker nursing a coffee, a family finishing their ribs, and Harold, the regular in the suit, reading a newspaper by the window. Malcolm's eyes scanned the staff. Talia Foster darted between tables, her apron splotched with sauce, her smile strained but persistent. Nia Brooks, the young cook, worked the fryer with laser focus, but her glances at Evan and Jade were sharp with frustration. Leroy Jackson's voice carried from the kitchen, steady and commanding. A lifeline in the storm. Malcolm moved to a corner booth, ordering a sweet tea to keep his cover. As he sipped, he watched Evan at the register, now joking with a delivery driver instead of ringing up orders. Jade, her gum snapping, ignored a customer waving for a refill. The dysfunction wasn't just in their words. It was in the details. A table's order sat cooling under the heat lamp, unnoticed by the servers. A spilled drink went uncleaned, forcing a customer to step around it. Malcolm typed another note. Lack of teamwork. Orders delayed. Customers neglected. He thought of Alma's words. You can't plant a garden and forget to water it. He'd been absent, letting weeds choke the diner's soul. But Evan and Jade's carelessness was a choice, and it was spreading. A sudden commotion broke his thoughts. A customer, a middle-aged woman in a bright scarf, stood up, her voice rising. "This is not what I ordered," she said, pointing to a plate of fried chicken instead of catfish. Nia, at the kitchen window, froze, her face falling. Evan, nearby, shrugged. "Not my fault the kitchen messed up," he said, loud enough for Nia to hear. The woman's eyes narrowed. "I've been waiting 20 minutes, and now this." Talia rushed over, apologizing, but the damage was done. Malcolm watched Nia's shoulders slump, her confidence shaken. Leroy stepped to the window, his voice calm but firm. "We'll fix it, ma'am." Catfish combo on the house. The woman softened, but the tension lingered. Malcolm typed. Evan deflects blame. Nia undermined. Leroy steps in. He glanced at Harold, who'd lowered his newspaper, his frown deepening. Harold caught Malcolm's eye for a split second, a flicker of recognition that made Malcolm's pulse quicken. Would the old man blow his cover? But Harold looked away, sipping his tea, and Malcolm exhaled. The incident with the wrong order was small, but it revealed the diner's cracks. A team divided, with some fighting to keep it afloat, and others letting it sink. Leroy was the anchor, but even he couldn't hold everything together alone. Malcolm finished his tea, the ice clinking in the glass, and slipped out to the alley behind Grammy's kitchen. The heat was relentless, the air thick with the smell of grease and garbage. He leaned against the brick wall, near a cracked kitchen window where voices drifted out. Avon's laugh was unmistakable. "Those boss ain't ever showing up," he said. "If he does, he'll probably act like he invented cornbread." Jade's gum snapped. "Yeah, too busy living it up in Buckhead. We're the ones stuck here." Malcolm's jaw tightened, but then Leroy's voice cut through, low and steady. "Y'all talk too much. Malcolm built this place from nothing. Show some respect or you'll find out why folks don't last here." A pause, then Evan scoffed. "Whatever, man. If you don't care, why should we?" Malcolm stepped back, his boots scuffing the gravel. Leroy's defense warmed him, but Evan and Jade's words were a cold truth. He'd been absent, leaving the team to fill the void with resentment. He pulled out his phone, typing, "Leroy loyal, others resentful. Absence breeds disrespect." He thought of the diner's early days, when he'd worked the grill beside Laurie, when Alma's recipes were a shared mission. That spirit was still here, buried under neglect, but it wasn't gone. He needed to unearth it, but first, he had to face the truth head dash on dot as dusk settled. Malcolm returned to the diner, this time as a late customer. The crowd had thinned, the neon sign casting a soft glow over the empty booths. He ordered a coffee, sitting near the counter where Cashier Turner, a new server, approached with a warm smile. "Evening," she said, her voice bright despite the long shift. "Coffee's fresh, just brewed." Malcolm nodded, studying her. Cashier was young, maybe 22, with braided hair and a quiet energy that stood out. Unlike Evan and Jade, she moved with purpose, checking on tables with genuine care. "Thanks," Malcolm said, testing the waters. "Busy day?" Cashier sighed, glancing at the kitchen. "Always is, but it's been tense. Folks aren't working together like they should." She hesitated, then added, "I'm new, so maybe I don't get it, but this place feels like it could be special, you know?" Malcolm's lips twitched into a faint smile. "It used to be," he said, careful not to reveal too much. Cashier tilted her head, curious, but didn't press. "Well, hope it gets there again," she said, moving to another table. Malcolm typed. Cashier Turner sees potential, could be a leader. Her words echoed his own hopes, a spark in the darkness. But the darkness was real. He overheard Evan complaining to Jade about extra work from the shelter program hires, their voices carrying. Over the counter, Talia, wiping down a table nearby, looked exhausted, her earlier effort worn thin. Mia, in the kitchen, was still focused, but her frustration was palpable. Laura's laugh rang out once, a brief reprieve, but it wasn't enough. Malcolm left the diner, the bell jingling softly. In his truck, he sat under the neon's glow, the city's hum fading into the background. He thought of Alma, stirring greens in her tiny kitchen, saying, "A place is only as strong as the people who tend it." He'd let Grammy's kitchen drift, but he wasn't blameless. Evan and Jade's disrespect was a symptom of his absence, and fixing it meant more than a confrontation. It meant showing up every day the way Alma had. He sent a group text to the staff. "Team meeting, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Mandatory. No explanation, just enough to shake them." Tomorrow, he'd walk in as Malcolm Haze, not a stranger, and the truth would follow. Malcolm Haze sat in a modest hotel room on the outskirts of Marietta, the glow of a single lamp casting shadows across the notepad in his lap. The clock read 11:47 p.m., and Atlanta's distant skyline twinkled through the window, a reminder of the city he'd poured his heart into. The day's events at Grammy's kitchen played on a loop in his mind. Evan Carter's smug mockery, Jade Ramsey's biting disdain, the spilled water glasses, the misdelivered catfish order, and the weary effort of Talia, Nia, and Leroy trying to hold it together. Malcolm's phone lay beside him, its screen filled with notes. Cashiers dismissive, mock customers and owner. Lack of teamwork. Leroy loyal, Cashier sees potential. Each word was a weight, a piece of the truth he'd uncovered by walking into his own diner as a stranger. Grammy's kitchen, built to carry his grandmother Alma's legacy of warmth and second chances, was fraying, and Malcolm knew he shared the blame. He'd sent a group text to the staff hours ago. "Team meeting, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Mandatory. No details, just enough to rattle them." Now, as he scribbled thoughts on his notepad, respect starts with presence. Accountability, not blame. Malcolm wrestled with what came next. Part of him wanted to fire Evan and Jade on the spot. Their words about walk-ins and the ghost. Boss, still burning. But Alma's voice echoed. Folks aren't broken, just overlooked. Give them a chance to grow. Firing them might feel good, but it wouldn't fix the diner's soul. He needed to confront them, to hold a mirror to their actions, and to own his own absence. Tomorrow wasn't about punishment. It was about rebuilding. Malcolm stood, pacing the room. He considered wearing the charcoal blazer and boots he used for official visits, a look the staff might recognize from pre-pandemic days. But he decided to keep the jeans and button down, tucking the Braves cap into his bag as a reminder of his undercover hours. Let them see him as they had, ordinary, unassuming, before he flipped their world upside down. He thought of Laura's defense through the kitchen window, Kaisha's hopeful words, and even Harold's knowing glance. The diner wasn't lost. It was waiting for someone to steer it back by 8:45 a.m. Malcolm was parked across from Grammy's kitchen, the neon sign, dim in the morning light. The Atlanta air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of coffee from a nearby cart. He watched the staff arrive, their faces a mix of annoyance and curiosity. Leroy Jackson was first, unlocking the side door with a key Malcolm had given him years ago, his broad shoulders set with purpose. Talia Foster followed, her apron already tied, her expression tired but determined. Nia Brooks, the young cook, carried a notebook, perhaps for recipes or ideas. Kaisha Turner arrived with a bounce in her step, her braids swaying as she greeted. Leroy. Evan Carter strolled in late, earbuds in, laughing at his phone. Jade Ramsey trailed behind, texting, her gum already snapping. Malcolm's jaw tightened, but he waited, letting the clock tick to 9:02. He stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots, and crossed the street. The diner's front door loomed, its bell silent until he pushed it open. Heads turned. Leroy's. Eyes locked onto his, a faint nod of recognition passing between them. Nia's eyebrows rose, her notebook forgotten. Talia paused mid-step, her tray wobbling. But Evan and Jade froze, their faces blank, as if their minds couldn't process the man in the doorway. Malcolm let the door close behind him, the jingle fading into a heavy silence. Malcolm stood in the center of Grammy's kitchen, the dining room's wooden tables and vinyl booths forming a quiet audience. The staff gathered near the front counter, some standing, others leaning awkwardly against booths, their murmurs dying out. The jukebox was off, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioner and Jade's gum, which she'd stopped chewing. Leroy crossed his arms, his expression unreadable but steady. Talia clutched her apron, her eyes darting between Malcolm and the floor. Nia shifted, her notebook pressed to her chest. Kaisha watched with quiet intensity, as if sensing the moments. Wait. Evan and Jade stood at the back, Evan's earbuds dangling, Jade's phone forgotten in her hand. Malcolm let the silence stretch, meeting each gaze, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside. "I won't keep you long," he said, his voice clear and firm, cutting through the tension like a knife. "But I need you to hear me, really hear me." He paused, scanning the room. "This place is named after my grandmother, Alma Hayes. She passed 15 years ago, but if you'd met her, you'd know why Grammy's kitchen is more than a job, more than food or Yelp reviews. She fed people who couldn't pay, gave second chances like they were cornbread, believed everyone deserved a seat at her table." Leroy stood taller, his eyes softening. Kaisha nodded slightly, her lips curving into a faint smile. But Evan and Jade looked down, their faces tight. Malcolm stepped forward, his boots scuffing the warm floor. "When I started this place, I wanted it to be her kitchen at scale, a place where people could eat, work, laugh, feel like they belonged. But yesterday, I walked in and didn't recognize what I built." The words landed like stones, and the staff shifted, their eyes flickering with unease. "I came in dressed down," he said, pointing to the spot by the counter. "Ordered a sandwich, stood right there. And I heard 2 employees talking about the man who owns this place, saying he don't show up, don't care. Talking about customers like they're trash, new hires like they're nothing." He didn't name Evan and Jade, but the room knew. Evan's foot tapped nervously. Jade's arms crossed tighter. "I heard it all." Malcolm continued, his voice steady but laced with disappointment. "And I walked out without my sandwich, without raising my voice, because I needed to understand. What went wrong? I'm Malcolm Hayes, the owner of Grammy's Kitchen. I built this place with scraped knees and borrowed money, but somewhere along the way, I let it slip. I stopped showing up. That's on me. He paused, letting the admission sink in. But that disrespect, that carelessness, that's on you. The silence was thick, broken only by a soft gasp from Talia. Evan's face paled, his earbuds slipping to the floor. Jade's eyes darted to the door, as if escape was an option. Lara's jaw tightened, a mix of pride and frustration in his gaze. Nia clutched her notebook, her expression torn between shame and resolve. Kaisha's eyes shone, as if Malcolm's words had lit something within her. Harold, lingering outside the window, gave a slow nod through the glass, unseen by the staff but noticed by Malcolm. I'm not here to yell, Malcolm said, his tone softening but firm. I'm here to fix this. Some of you, he glanced at Leroy and Kaisha, carry the heart of this place, and I see that. Others, you've been clocking in, cashing checks, treating this like it's beneath you. That ends now. Evan opened his mouth, his voice shaky. We didn't know it was you, man. I mean, Malcolm raised a hand, cutting him off. If I was a VIP, would you have said those things? If I was a critic, would you have mocked the customers? The problem isn't that you didn't know me, it's that you didn't care. Evan's mouth closed, his face reddening. Jade looked away, her gum forgotten. Malcolm's gaze swept the room. This place is Alma's legacy. Every person who walks through that door deserves respect, customer, coworker, or stranger. That's the standard, and if you can't meet it, this ain't your home. He stepped back, his voice steady. We start fresh tomorrow. Be ready. The words hung in the air, a challenge and a promise. Malcolm turned toward the door, pausing to meet Leroy's gaze, a silent acknowledgement. The bell jingled as he stepped out, leaving the staff in a stunned silence, the weight of the truth settling over Grammy's kitchen like a new dawn. The bell above Grammy's kitchen's door jingled softly as Malcolm Hayes stepped into the Atlanta morning, leaving behind a dining room heavy with silence. His words from the 9 a.m. meeting, respect is the standard, and if you can't meet it, this ain't your home, hung in the air like the smoky scent of brisket that defined the diner. The staff stood frozen, their faces a mosaic of shock, shame, and uncertainty. Laro Jackson, the grill master, leaned against a booth, his arms crossed, a flicker of pride in his eyes but worry creasing his brow. Talia Foster clutched her apron, her exhaustion now mixed with guilt. Nia Brooks, the young cook, gripped her notebook, her expression torn between resolve and embarrassment. Kaisha Turner's gaze followed Malcolm out, her warm brown eyes alight with inspiration. But Evan Carter and Jade Ramsey, the cashiers who'd mocked him as a ghost boss, stood at the back, Evan's earbuds dangling, Jade's gum forgotten. Their faces pale as the truth sank in. Evan broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. He was right there? The whole time? He ran a hand over his twists, his usual smirk gone. Jade's arms tightened across her chest, her eyes fixed on the floor. We didn't know, she mumbled, but the words sounded hollow, even to her. She remembered her quip about walk-ins off Peachtree and felt a flush of shame. Talia glanced at them, her lips parting as if to speak, then closed, shaking her head. The dining room, with its scarred wooden tables and photos of Alma Hayes smiling down, felt like a courtroom where they'd all been judged, not just by Malcolm, but by their own actions. Leroy cleared his throat, his deep voice steady. Y'all heard the man. Time to step up or step out. He moved toward the kitchen, his boots scuffing the floor, signaling the meeting's end. The staff dispersed, their movements slow, as if the weight of Malcolm's words had anchored them. Kaisha approached Nia, her voice soft. He's giving you us a chance, you know? That's more than some bosses would do. Nia nodded, her grip on her notebook easing. Yeah, but I should have spoken up when Evan threw me under the bus yesterday. Kaisha squeezed her shoulder. Start now. That's what he's asking. In the kitchen, the clatter of pots resumed, but it was subdued. Talia wiped down tables. With more focus, her earlier exhaustion replaced by a quiet determination. Nia prepped ingredients, her movements precise, but her mind clearly elsewhere. Evan and Jade returned to the register, but their usual banter was gone. Evan kept his phone in his pocket, his eyes darting nervously. Jade's gum chewing was slower, her glances at the door frequent, as if expecting Malcolm to reappear. Later that morning, Evan sought Malcolm out, finding him in a small office cluttered with invoices and recipe cards. Malcolm was reviewing his notes from the day before, still in his jeans and buttoned down, the Braves cap on the desk. Evan hesitated at the door, his voice shaky. Mr. Hayes, I messed up. I didn't know. You were there, but that don't make it right. I'm sorry. Malcolm looked up, his dark eyes steady but not unkind. Sorry's a start, Evan, but it's not enough. You disrespected this place customers, co-workers, me. If you want to stay, show me you can do better. Not with words, but with how you work. Evan nodded, his jaw tight, and left the challenge. Ringing in his ears, Jade, however, was wrestling with her own thoughts. She lingered by the counter during a lull, her fingers twisting a napkin. She thought of her first job, where a manager had called her just a cashier, and realized she'd done the same to others. The shame was sharp, but so was her doubt. Could she change? Did she even belong here? She avoided Malcolm, unsure if she could face him. The next morning, Malcolm arrived at Grammy's kitchen before sunrise, the Atlanta skyline still dotted with stars. He'd swapped his jeans for a crisp button-down, but his resolve was the same. The diner's neon sign flickered, its green and yellow glow a quiet call to action. Today was about rebuilding, not just pointing out flaws. He gathered the staff in the dining room for a short training session, the air thick with anticipation. Evan stood stiffly. Jade kept her eyes down, but Leroy, Talia, Nia, and Keisha leaned in, ready to listen. We're here to make Grammy's what it was meant to be, Malcolm said, his voice firm but warm. A place where every guest feels like family, where every job matters. That starts with respect for each other, for the people we serve, for Alma's legacy. He outlined his plan. Daily huddles to align the team, a customer spotlight, board for guest feedback, and a Team Star program to recognize effort, whether it was a cashier's smile or a dishwasher's hustle. We've got a big community event tonight, free meals for local kids, he added. Let's show them who we can be. The staff nodded, some hesitantly, others eagerly. Keisha volunteered to lead the front-of-house setup for the event, suggesting a welcome table to greet families. Malcolm gave her the go-ahead, noting her spark. Good call, Keisha. Make it yours. Talia, inspired, began checking in with tables more proactively, even helping a new server during the lunch rush. Nia, in the kitchen, suggested a new twist on Alma's cornbread, adding a pinch of smoked paprika, and Leroy, after tasting it, grinned. That's got soul, kid, he said, boosting her confidence. But not everyone adapted smoothly. During the evening event, with kids laughing and tables packed, Evan struggled to keep up at the register. A parent asked about the shelter program, and Evan muttered, "It's just some charity thing," his tone dismissive. Leroy, passing by, overheard and pulled him aside. "That thing is why people like Isaiah are here," he said, his voice low. "Get it together, or you're out." Evan nodded, chastened, and returned to the register with a forced smile. But the moment stuck with him. Jade, meanwhile, made a decision. After the event, she approached Malcolm, her voice quiet. "I don't think I'm cut out for this. she admitted. "I've been chasing a paycheck, not a purpose." "You need people who believe in this place." Malcolm studied her, then nodded. "Thank you for being honest, Jade. That takes guts. Finish your shift, and I'll write you a recommendation." She left her apron folded on the counter, her exit. A quiet acknowledgement that change wasn't for everyone. By week's end, the diner felt different, not perfect, but alive. Keisha greeted customers by name. Talia's smiles were genuine, and Nia's cornbread became a hit. Evan, though slower to change, started thanking customers, his phone staying in his pocket. Leroy took on a mentorship role, guiding the kitchen with a steady hand. Malcolm, present daily, worked alongside the team, even washing dishes one night to remind himself of the diner's roots. A review from the community event appeared online. Grammy's kitchen is back, warm, welcoming, like family. Malcolm read it in the alley, under the neon's glow, and felt a spark of hope. The garden was being watered again, but the real test lay ahead. The Atlanta dusk draped Grammy's kitchen in a soft amber glow, the green and yellow neon sign flickering like a heartbeat above the door. Malcolm Hayes stood in the alley out back, where he'd first overheard Evan and Jade's careless mockery. A month ago, the air carried the faint tang of barbecue sauce and the hum of a city settling into evening. Inside, the diner pulsed with life, not just the clatter of plates or the sizzle of ribs on the grill, but a warmth that hadn't been there before. Malcolm leaned against the brick wall, his boots scuffing the gravel, and let the moment sink. Grammy's kitchen was finding its soul again, and though the work wasn't done, the spark of Alma's legacy was burning brighter than it had in years. The past month had been a quiet revolution. Keisha Turner, now leading the front-of-house team, greeted customers like old friends, her warm smile setting the tone. A welcome table at the community event had become a permanent fixture, adorned with kids' drawings and guest notes. Talia Foster moved through shifts with newfound ease, her laughter mingling with customers as she shared stories about Alma's recipes. Nia Brooks's smoked paprika cornbread was a menu staple, her confidence growing with every compliment. Leroy Jackson, promoted to kitchen manager, guided the team with a steady hand, mentoring young cooks like Isaiah, the shelter program hire who now worked the fryer with pride. Even Evan Carter, once the diner's loudest cynic, was changing slowly. He kept his phone pocketed, thanked customers with a nod, and had started helping Talia clear tables during rushes. Jade Ramsey's departure had been a loss, but her honesty in leaving paved the way for those who stayed to commit fully. The diner's revival wasn't just internal. A week ago, Grammy's Kitchen hosted its annual anniversary cookout, serving free plates to the neighborhood. Families filled the parking lot, kids chasing each other under string lights, while Leroy grilled ribs and Keisha handed out sweet tea. Harold, the regular in the suit, returned, leaving a note on the counter. "Alma's back in this place. Don't let her go." Online reviews reflected the shift, one calling the diner Atlanta's heart, where food and kindness feed. Malcolm read them under the neon's glow, his chest tight with pride. The garden Alma had planted was blooming again, watered by effort and accountability. Malcolm's thoughts turned inward, to the boy who'd watched Alma feed strangers in her tiny kitchen, to the man who'd built this diner with borrowed money and big dreams. He'd been that walk-in once, overlooked, underestimated. Those scars drove him to create a place where respect was non-negotiable, but he'd lost his way, letting absence dim the diner's light. Now, present every day grilling beside Leroy, joking with Keisha, even scrubbing pots, he felt whole. Grammy's Kitchen wasn't just a business. It was home, and he'd fight to keep it that way. This story, though, is bigger than one diner. It's about us, how we treat those we think don't matter, how we show up for what we've built. Malcolm's journey teaches us that respect isn't a title or a paycheck. It's a choice made in the small moments, a smile to a stranger, a hand to a struggling coworker, a willingness to own our mistakes. We all judge sometimes by clothes, jobs, or pasts, but every person carries a story worth hearing. Malcolm didn't just save Grammy's kitchen. He reminded us that change starts with seeing each other, truly seeing and acting with heart. In workplaces, families, or communities, that's the seed of transformation. As Malcolm stepped back. Inside, the bell jingling, he caught Leroy's grin from the kitchen, Kaisha's wave from the counter. The diner sang with motion plates stacked, laughter shared, customers lingering like they belonged. Malcolm paused by a photo of Alma, her church tilted, her smile fierce and kind. "We're still watering, Grandma," he whispered, then joined the team, ready for the next rush. Grammy's kitchen was no longer just a name. It was a promise kept, a legacy reborn. If Malcolm's story stirred something in you, if it made you think about respect, second chances, or the power of showing up, carry it forward. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's forgotten their own garden. And join us at Legacy Stories, where we tell tales of heart, hustle, and humanity. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us to look deeper, act kinder, and keep the light burning. Hit that button and let's grow these legacies together, one story at a time.